What was your training like? How was the field of Tai Chi then, and how is it different from now?
Oh gosh, yeah, it was quite different. People didn't know about it. It was this weird thing. I mean, people know about Tai Chi now, right? So you go and talk to them, and even if they don't quite know what it is, all you have to say is, "Oh, you watched the Olympics in China, right? Everybody doing this." And then they say, "Oh, yeah, right." And then they make these little motions. So, so people know about it now. They've got some idea. They think it's yoga. People think it's Chinese yoga. They don't understand it's a Chinese martial art. No. But they know what it is. People didn't know what it was. And I first ran across it in 1980, I think. And a bunch of grad students, friends, and I all went camping on the beach in Big Sur. And I got up early in the morning, and one of my friends was out doing, the standing post postures out on the beach. And I thought it looked really cool. And so then I started studying with
I periodically check this thing, so
yeah,
okay.
at the school he was going to. And that I studied there for a year and a half, 2 years, on and off. And it was a pretty old-style school. They also did some Shaolin. And they didn't teach you the form until you'd gotten through a 4-month set of Jiben Gong, the introductory fundamental exercises. Right. And so I did that 4-month set like 3 or 4 times. And then I'd burn out and stop, and so I learned like the first move. Then I came here and started studying with Jane Baton. And those guys, what they got out of Professor Chung in New York was really a desire to spread it far and wide. So that was really what they wanted to do. They wanted Tai Chi everywhere. Any Tai Chi was good, and more Tai Chi was just better. And so they were teaching like crazy everywhere. They had all these like Tai Chi for ski. They didn't cross-country ski particularly, but they were trying to teach Tai Chi for that. They were doing a bunch of workshops. They were traveling all over the country and doing workshops. They were teaching a lot of classes. They taught all the classes in Naropa. It wasn't like it is now with multiple people teaching. They taught them all. And they taught multiple beginning classes. They taught my first third class in 6.5 weeks. We did it 2 days, 2 nights a week, Tuesday and Thursday. And bang, bang, bang. We started November 8th, Beth's birthday, and we're done before Christmas with the first third. And so they taught it pretty fast and basically tried to just let it grow however it grew. The thing that happened for me was Ben Lowe showed up early on, maybe 4 months into my practice, 5 months into my practice, and Ben is very hardcore, old school. And so the thing he did was bring this real precision and hard work. So Jane in particular, but she and Baton played with it and explored it and tried to see what was going on and, in many ways worked way over our heads, us the students. Jane would work on advanced things that we really didn't have any chance of getting, but it was fun to start having that stuff come in and play around with it and try to see what you could do with it. And Ben, at that point, came 2 or 3 times a year and would do a weekend workshop and just drill us. Long posture holding, hard work. And so it was a good balance. So we had him really, driving it in, and Jane and Baton opening it up. And so that was, I think if I had just had Jane and Baton, I probably wouldn't have the grounding and depth and precision that Ben had brought. If I just had Ben, I think I would probably be much more rigid and solid than what we got by having the two of them together. And those are things I see in both of the students. I see people who only studied with Jane and Baton being a little floaty and not precise and not, getting it just perfection of form. And I see people that have only studied with Ben really being down and solid and unmoving and rigid and not having the roundness. And so I think all that stuff coming together was good. So we did that forever. 15 years. Something like that was just, practice. We went to all Jane and Baton's classes. It was Saturday all day, Tuesday all day, Thursday all day. Monday night there was push hands. Friday night we'd do reading group and do stuff. So it was just Tai Chi. And then Jane got sick. It was the end of her life. And she introduced us to Maggie, basically connected us up with Maggie Newman and, said, here, take it from here. And it was a couple of years before she died that she did this and said, look, I've really taught you guys what I have. but I want you to get more. And we'd been working with Wolf on push hands. She said, but Maggie she was the one who was Professor's disciple in New York. Wolf is great. Wolf's better than I am. He's got a lot of insight, my senior classmate. But Maggie's, lineage holder, connect with her and do all of that. And she provided a written intro to us and called Maggie and, basically connected us with her. And so then that's been the last 14 years, I guess, is working with her. If stuff add up, right? 15, 16, 14, yeah, that's about right. So, but it's been basically the same components. Right? So at the beginning it was form, form, form. Ben brought a lot of the posture holdings, which is his version of the drills, fundamentals, Jiben Gong. He did a little push hands, but not a lot. So we did a lot of kind of free form push hands with Jane and Baton. Not much focus on the form. And Wolf came and gave us the push hands form, and he brought to push hands the same precision that Ben had brought to the form. And we learned the sword, but I just farted around with the sword. It was just a stick. I waved it around. It wasn't until I really started studying with Maggie that I got, the next level of sword. And then in the last 4 or 5 years, I've worked with some other people out of the Yang lineage. Adam Meisner, so he's Wang Shengshan, he's also Yang Xiaoho. So Xiaoho was Cheng Fu's younger brother. So he's got some connection through that. I'm another guy, Yang Fengwei, who's from the Yang Banho tradition, the Yang Jianho tradition. So he's different the generation before. He's 5 hops away or something. And so the things that those guys have done is, one, given us more stuff to do. So if you come and study at the school now, we've got more practices than we used to have. But most importantly, I think what they did was give us a couple missing pieces. Yang Fengwei said to me, you've got all the stuff. There's just a couple little pieces that you're missing. I'm not going to teach you everything. I'm not going to teach you a form. I'm not going to teach you all these things. I'm just going to give you a couple little missing pieces. And if I do that, then all of a sudden everything else will come together for you. So I think, if you study with us now, we seem like we're a Chengmen Cheng school. It seems like we're a Chengmen Cheng school from New York, even, not San Francisco, not Taiwan, not Malaysia. We seem like we're Chengmen Cheng out of New York. But we've got these extra little pieces in there that I think help the whole thing come together. And so that's, I don't know if that's quite what the training was like. Practice every day, twice a day, every day. Do it. I would try to practice longer sometimes. I had trouble with that over the years. And in the last 10 or 15, I've been able to get a deeper, more consistent, longer practice doing harder work. And it pays off, makes a big difference, fast.
How do you come to terms with Tai Chi as a spiritual discipline, as something that is a deeper thing for you, and having to, the career aspect of it, having to run this school?
Oh yeah, so
the
it's
practical. Where does the practical and the spiritual?
Right? It's a job, and I'm actually just doing the taxes right now. So I can actually see that we actually did make some money last year. When we inherited the school, it was not a job thing. So I think that's something that's going to be different for you guys, the next generation. I had a whole career in consulting and did this whole thing, and I could still be doing that. But then having the school come, which is something I always wanted to do, to actually teach and have that be the main thing I'm doing, it was an opportunity, and luckily I was in a place where I could do that. So our mantra here at Recommend Tai Chi, since we took it over from Baton, has been, we just don't want to pay to teach. So I'm not thinking about it as a money-making endeavor first. We do have to make enough money to pay the rent. The rent's substantial on this thing. I pay more rent here than I do from mortgage on my house. So it's real. My mortgage is cheap.
That just clicked on me. It's terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no. So it's it's real money. So you got to make sure you're doing that. I've got the freedom to not need to make a lot of money beyond that. If I can make some, then it makes a difference, and it's a good thing. And so that's a luxury that we had. I also think approaching it as practice-based, both for myself and then also for everybody else, honestly, is financially rewarding. I think we make more money by not caring about the money. I don't chase anybody for dues. I don't do credit cards or contracts or any of that stuff. I think the school is booming in the last 2 years. I do look at student numbers. I mean, I track all that stuff just because I'm an anal retentive nerd. I do all that stuff. And so I can see that the trends, the financial trends are positive. It's, going the right direction. We're going to have to rent more time. But I see that as an opportunity to let the senior students start taking on classes and teaching, and it's a way for them to grow, rather than, oh boy, all right, I'm going to make more money. At some level, if you're trying to support a family and you're at a different point in your life, you're going to have to make different trade-offs and different balances. I've got the luxury of not doing that. And so having that luxury, I think actually makes it work out better financially. I try to separate my practice from what's going on in the school. So teaching is not practicing. And if I see a lot of people fall into that and they think their teaching time is their practice time. Oh, okay, sorry. But I still try to keep my practice separate from that. And then when I'm here, I can be paying attention to the students and trying to help them advance in it. Tai Chi's going to change, It was this weird pro wrestling thing that young Chuan rose, ragged to riches, and became the head of the emperor's bodyguards. What did it mean to be the head of the emperor's bodyguards in 1830? It meant you were like the after-dinner entertainment, right? The emperor's throwing a big party, and he'd bring, somebody's coming and visiting, and, they all drink and eat, and, serving girls are all around. And then they bring out Yang Chuan, and he has a public fight with the champion of the guy who's coming and visiting. Do you think there was much doubt about who was going to win? Behind the scenes, Luchan had to have stuff. He had to be really, really good. He had to be able to win. But, it's definitely, if you're the guy who's coming with the visiting dignitary, you're going to think twice about kicking the emperor's head of his bodyguard's ass, right? So head of the bodyguards didn't mean Secret Service. It was a lot more like pro wrestling, I think. I don't know, but I think that was a lot more what's going on. So there's that. Then there's the second generation where they were having schools and they really did have challenges and all that stuff. They didn't have the emperor watching over them. They were just guys. So, there's that. Then there's the popularization generation, Yang Cheng-Fu opening up big schools, teaching lots of people. There's Professor Chung bringing it here to the States, changing a lot. There's, me, hippie done good, living here in Boulder and doing this groovy thing. And there's you guys taking it to a next generation. So it's going to change a lot. That's just what's going to happen. I forgot what the question was.
The question was, you answered it several
great.
minutes ago. Coming to terms with your career and spirituality.
Yeah, so that's actually part of it. Right, so there's my own practice, and my own practice has a lot of components, and that's different than running the school, and that's different than giving value to the students and letting them take it and build it in their lives. And I do much better if I separate those three than if I try to think of them as one. And I've got to support all three of them. So that's actually the answer to the question.
There we go. Okay, so this is one I'm especially curious about, given your background. How do you keep the transmission that you transmit true? Especially given that you've had different teachers.
Yeah. So, they all taught one thing. They taught different pieces of it. The blind man and the elephant, blah, 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 right? And I think the great thing that our teachers had, and also the bad thing that they had, was they had a lot of time with the master. So I will never have the hours spent in the company of Cheng Man-Cheng. I will never have, the actual touch and feeling that. And, Cheng was just a guy, right? He was just a guy. Human being like any of us. But huge skill levels. Everybody who interacted with him said his skill was way higher than any of theirs. He said Yang Cheng-Fu, his teacher's skill, was way higher than his. So there's this whole level of people. So even the best people that I've touched, I don't think any of them would say, oh, I'm as good as Cheng Man-Cheng. That'd just be stupid. So I'll never have that. I'll never have that direct contact. On the other hand, I think part of what happened for all those people is, especially like folks like Jade and Baton, they met Cheng when they were young. And they spent 7, 10 years with him, and then he was gone. And he was so much better than anybody else they were going to meet. It was really hard for them to find another teacher and study from another teacher. And so they all kept their parts, and they grew their parts, And they did, they were amazing people. And all of them, more charismatic, more talented, more capable than I'll ever be. I mean, they just had something. I'm just a guy. And they had another thing that I don't have. And was it the contact with the master? Was it something inside them? They all had that. And so they were able to take that and run with it. And so Maggie has really deeply, deeply studied the mechanics and how the body and energy work and how you actually make meaningful movement so that it's whole body and every instant you're there. Jane really explored what does it mean to have a Tai Chi body and to be in space, and how do I make everything be curves and go. Baton really explored quietness and stability and silence. Wolf has really explored push hands. How can I take Peng Lu Jian, and what can I do out of that, and how far can I take that? And so I think they kind of all have different pieces of it. And so each of them got something from the master that I know I'll never get, but they also didn't get the whole package from him. And so I sort of feel like it's my job, our job, to take all those things and put them together. And they fit. So it feels to me like one thing. And so that's what I try to work from, is the one thing. Rather, and then it's got, Wolf talked about this, Jane talked about this, Adams talked about this, Baton used to do this, Ben tells you to do it like this, So I've got all those pieces. But as long as I'm still working on the one thing, then that feels legitimate. And that's what I try to transmit to people. As the students get more advanced and I'm working on them at the next level, I'm trying to get that one gestalt across. Because if they have that, then they'll start discovering things. If I give them a lot of tools, here's all the pieces, here's the drills, here's the forms, here's all the stuff, and here's the overall idea, the gestalt. And now it's up to you to go look at the 18 therapies, or to go look at the silk reelings, or to go look at Peng Lu Jian, or the Chuan form, or Dalu, and look at any of those and figure out, how do you do that as Tai Chi? Mm-hmm. And I'm a lot more interested in transmitting the mechanics of the drills and the overall idea, and then letting the student figure out their version of how the principles express in the mechanics of that drill, than I am in trying to say, when you're doing this, here's how the principles express. Right? If I can get them to have the principles, and I can give them a big toolkit of stuff to work on, and the sincere students will then explore that and dig into it, and they'll find things I didn't find. They'll express the form or the drills in a different way than I got them, but they'll still be working on the principle. Now, there's some stuff that's just sacrosanct, the form. So you got to transmit the form details, both square form, precisely here, precisely here, precisely here, precisely here. You got to do all that, and round form. It curved through this way. This hand must be turning as it comes across, corner to corner. The whole thing turning in back. Now it fills out. So I want to do that, because the form's really the core vehicle for it. And then there's other stuff, like the 18 therapies. I don't really care if somebody does those differently than I do, as long as they do it authentically. Push hands, people have shown us so many different variations of push hands.
What do you mean by authentically?
That all the movement has meaning and corresponds to the principles. Mm-hmm. I asked Maggie about this. I said, 2 or 3 years ago, and basically politely saying, "Look, Maggie, you're not going to be around forever." I'm trying to keep moving and going, and I'm finding new people and doing some stuff with new people, and so what do I do? How do I keep it authentic? And she said, "You know what good Tai Chi is. Watch that it corresponds to the principles, and the most important is don't use force. So find out how to move with Yi and Qi, not force. And if you're doing that, then it's good Tai Chi and it'll take you the right direction. If you're not doing that, then it's not real Tai Chi. You're going the wrong direction. Don't stick with that. But seeing that it's wrong is just as valuable as going the right way. Seeing where it diverges from principle. And so that's what she said. Keep to the principles. Use Yi and Qi, not force. And if it's that, then it's Tai Chi, and you can keep going with that. So I think that was actually great. It was very freeing, because you can get bound to the mechanics and the shape and the externals, and that's not what matters, right? Internal art and internal transmission. What I'm doing isn't what Professor Chuan did, isn't what Yang Cheng Fu did, certainly isn't what Yang Luchan did. you know, externally. But if we can keep that principles and, you know, really use E, not Li, that's the heart of it. And so that's the thing I try to look at. And I try to be critical of myself too, and say, what am I doing? You know, what the hell was that? There was strength when you just did that. You know, I got to keep that eye on myself also.
Some of us have a harder time with that than others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and it's really, you know, especially when you've got a lot of strength. I think people, you know, like you and people who are big and tall a lot of times have a disadvantage because it's so hard to give that stuff up and to be honest about it. And the thing is, you're not going to lose your strength and your skill. Right? You're always
Will
gonna have
eventually.
them. Sure, you will eventually. But, you know, in the short term, you know, next couple decades, you're just going to have them. So it's always there for you. So the question is, what can you do from principle in E and Chi? And then you've always got that. And, you know, Professor Chung said, lead them with 4 ounces and then discharge obliquely, and the force of the discharge is up to me. So, you know, I lead them, I bring them off, I get them out of their root and off balance, and then I can let them have it. And then you get to apply all your stuff. And, you know, in, quote, the real situation, use your Tai Chi as best as you can, and then if it's a reason you have to win, you know, it's a physical competition that you are concerned about safety, it's, you know, in front of us, your school, and you need to, you know, defend against a challenger, it's, you know, you gotta win, for some reason you gotta win, well then, sure, go ahead and win.
Okay. All right. How has Tai Chi helped you in real life?
Well,
Rather, how has Tai Chi helped you outside of the domain of the school?
Sure. So a piece of it's health, right? Health and energy.
Real life.
You know, and so I think you can't undervalue that. And this whole experience with Beth in the car accident. I mean, you know, just the thing about learning to have your head in the right position so that when the airbags go off and the car slams into your face, your head's in a position where you don't get whiplash and you don't hurt your neck. What can you say? You know, that's better than anything, right?
Yeah.
You know, for me personally, I did a lot of travel. I traveled 3 weeks out of a month for the last 20, 25 years. And I did a lot of fairly high stress consulting. So it was executive consulting, strategic IT consulting, you know, so I'd go into companies, they would only bring me in if they were screwed up, right? So, you know, you're right, the companies that are working, they don't need the outsiders to come in, right? So they'd only bring me in when there was trouble, and my job would be to try to figure out what are the leverage points and how can I get people here moving in a productive direction. As the consultants, you could speak the truth because you were going to be gone. So the people there are all caught in this political structure and what's going on. And they bring somebody in from the outside who can speak the truth, and they can all hate you, and you're going to be gone. And so that's a difficult situation to be in. So the listening skills, trying to really understand what's going on. What are people not saying? What do they mean when they say this? How do you read the energy of a room? How do I control my energy so that, you know, there's times when you have to just pound on the table and say, you know, stop it, everybody, shut the fuck up. And, you know, you got to know when to do that and not get your own, you know, not get caught in the heat of it. And of course, I did that better sometimes than others, but those are all Tai Chi skills. Getting up in front of a room of people and talking and improvising, right? Teaching is improvising. You have an idea, but you got to be ready to go off the script. And you have to read what's going on in the room and see what's happening. Those skills apply directly to my professional work. And then, you know, flying to the UK twice a month, going to Norway, going to Cyprus, going to Hong Kong, doing all that stuff. There's no sleep ever. You're tired. It's, you know, so managing your energy and keeping myself fit and able to perform, Tai Chi was hugely valuable for that. And then I think just actually, you know, this thing about being engaged, but not pushing yourself into stuff, while not hiding away, that energetic way to actually relate to people, I think is hugely valuable in work, in family, in friendships, in the grocery store when I'm, you know, stepping out of the way for somebody, you know, all that stuff, actually being there. That's probably the most tangible thing that it does for me day to day, is it keeps me engaged and present without forcing the situation and without trying to hide from it.
So I said this was coming back. what is the relationship between your personal practice and your teaching practice?
Oh, so they inform each other. They're two different things, but I have to keep them both going. I have to make sure my personal practice goes. I've seen a lot of people who stop putting so much effort into their personal practice as they start teaching. And we had one classmate, yeah, yeah, who at one point I heard him telling another student, "Oh, it's way better to teach than to be in class. It's so much easier to be the teacher than to stand there holding postures." And I just think that is completely wrong. I've watched other people who are, basically trying to log their hours of practice and thinking about all the teaching as being their practice, and their practice actually gets smaller and smaller. And so they really have to be two separate things. And in fact, the matter is, the stuff I work on in my own practice is pretty different than what I work on in class. I do the form every day, but that is not the bulk of my practice. So, out of an hour and a half or 2 hours, 10 or 15 minutes will be spent actually doing the form. And the rest of it's spent on other stuff, exploring things, standing, doing my drills. There's a bunch of other stuff I do in there. And so most of that stuff I'm not going to bring into class. Partly it's pearls before swine. Most people won't practice it, so there's no reason to put that stuff out because they won't take it and use it valuably. It's not like I think the students are swine, but it's not it's not the right thing to bring to them. They won't value it. The flip side of that is it won't be what they need, right? So the big thing I got to get people doing is actually getting a practice, getting their bodies and their minds working together, being ready to explore this and take it someplace. And then if they want to do that, great, we'll start working on the other stuff. If what they want is a pleasant social environment where they get some exercise and they do this cool thing and they have something that they work on at home, that's awesome. It's way better than not having it. So if I'm giving them that, that's really good. But there's no reason to tell them, stand in these postures for 20 minutes and do this drill for 35 minutes. There's just no reason to do that with them. They'll hate it, they'll go away, they won't get the benefit, and we won't help anybody. So they're very different, but they inform each other. The stuff that I'm working on in my own practice, the insights I have, then I try to understand how that applies into what's going on in class. And so you'll see echoes of what I'm doing in personal practice in class, but it's usually offset, a year, 3 years, 5 years. So most of what I'm teaching from is what I was working on personally some amount of time ago. And now that, Baton passed away and left the school to us, I used to never teach beginners. Right? I had the totally snotty position of I don't teach new moves to people. I only work on, moves that people have already learned, and other people taught beginners. And partly I was being a shithead and being too spoiled just to do that, and partly it was I'm just not around that much. So it's stupid for me to spend time going over the postural details with people when I'm not going to be here for another month, and that's not what I have to offer them. So I can give them something different. So I never used to do that. Now I am teaching beginners, raw, bare beginners, doing it a lot. And so it makes me adjust my teaching so it's more layered. So the way I teach raw beginners is different from the way I teach in Naropa terms level 2 people, is different from level 3, is different from, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so that's a big thing for me, is to start trying to perceive how the practice is layered that way. What's appropriate at each level? What do I really want to drill into these students so they get it right? And what is, like what Jane used to do when she'd come in and say, let's work on an advanced concept. And so it was great to have that stuff coming in, and you're aware of it, you can't quite do it yet, but you see that there's more, and it percolates through. So I do some of that deliberately. But, even then, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I don't ever talk about in class. Either because it's confusing to people, it would take them the wrong direction, they don't have the foundation to get it, I don't think it's actually what's relevant for them. And so as time goes on, actually the teaching and the practice get, if anything, more separate. I used to teach what I was practicing, and I don't so much anymore.
What brought you to the practice, and what kept you there?
Well, it's so groovy. My friend Andy was standing there on the beach in Big Sur, and he was standing like this, and the surf was coming in, and the wind was blowing, and the sun was just coming up from behind him, and, it was 1980, and, how much cooler can you get than that, right? So, I wanted to be cool too. So, and of course, I watched David Carradine and Grasshopper take the, from my palm, whatever. Of course I had, boy martial arts fantasies and that whole thing. So of course I had that piece of it. What kept me with it is, it's just so damned fun. I mean, it's just really great. It makes you feel good. It's really, really interesting. It's just, it's infinite. Ben Lowe likes to say martial art. The art part means no limits. So it just goes on forever. There's no limits. You don't ever finish. Maggie says, Professor Chung gave us this puzzle of how do you move another person without using force. It's impossible. That's a beautiful puzzle to have. There's a problem I can spend my life trying to solve. So it's without limit. It's without limit. And the martial part, you're way more of a fighter than I am. Just in terms of life and in terms of everything you're doing, and that's a good thing. So I tend to hear function for martial. I think it needs to work. It doesn't mean I need to go out and get in fights or anything, but I need to be able to interact with another person in a potentially hostile, combative circumstance, and it needs to be functional. I need to be able to, when you're standing there and saying, damn it, you are not going to move me, I got to be able to move you, right? I mean, no guarantee I'm going to do it every time, right? And, probably with you it's 50-50, maybe I'll get 60-40.
It's more like 90-10.
Yeah, whatever, but, it won't work every time, but it's got to work some. And that's what I hear from the martial. It has to actually work. And the martial there's something built into us, especially us male primates, right? The women have a different thing going, but especially the boys. We've got a thing that needs to get expressed in that. And so it brings a real clarity and focus and, precision right here, right now, this really matters. And I think that's important too. So that's what keeps me with it. It's really fun. I love interacting with other people. I love getting to do it together. I feel so much better after doing it. It's eternally interesting. I can't do it yet. I'm farther and farther away from being able to do it as I practice more. It recedes away. That's a beautiful thing.
The more you chase it, the further away it
Yeah,
gets.
yeah, exactly. And I'm moving along. I'm getting farther. No question about that. So it's just great. It's great that the goal recedes off into infinity. And I assume that'll happen forever. That's what everybody says.
Okay. I'm going to add a question in here, specific to you. How did you get yourself to establish a daily practice?
Oh gosh, I just did it. I went to my first class, and Baton said, you should practice every morning and every evening. And I went home that night, and I practiced. And I got up the next morning, and I practiced. And I just did it.
It's so simple.
I just believed them when they said do it every day. I don't practice in the night very much anymore. I'll play around. And my practice has changed, because I'm doing longer time periods. But I just did it. One of the things I think about is that this is something I'm doing for myself. So even when I'm buried in all the shit of life, so much stuff going on, it's 6 a.m. in the UK, also known as 11 p.m. here at home, and I, fitfully slept for an hour and a half, and I have to get up and I have to go ride the train an hour to Oxford and get there and be in a meeting and produce, and there's no time for anything, and that stuff is not for yourself. It's like, I've got 10 minutes that's just for me. And the email can wait, the family hassles can wait, the work can wait. I've got 10 minutes that's for me in the morning. And that's really important. And so giving myself that, don't worry about anything, it's only 10 minutes. I could sit on the can for 10 minutes. That 10 minutes could be gone in the blink of an eye. And if I just give myself the 10 minutes, I'm so much happier. And so I've just always done it. Sure, I've missed days. There's days I haven't practiced in the last 30 years.
No,
Yeah,
really?
right, sure. Of course, stuff happens, and stuff happens. But I try not to beat myself up about that, and I feel better if I do it. So, I just always done it every day.
Alrighty then. On to the actual question.
Sorry.
It's okay.
What do you do with someone who comes into the school or outside of the school and pisses on the practice? Whether they're doing it themselves and just like shithousing around inside the school, or they're outside the school saying, "Oh, Tai Chi's garbage. It's fucking crap." And
Oh, if they're outside the school, I don't care. Right? And so it's easy. I talk to a lot of people who are like, I'm tired of the reputation that Tai Chi has, and I want to bring it back as a combat art, and I want everybody to see, really, we're kick-ass, because it's just so embarrassing what everybody says about Tai Chi. I don't give a shit about that. Right? That's male primate dominance games. No. And, I'm an old fart now, right? So I don't have to care about that stuff anymore. So I just don't care about that. If somebody's complaining about it outside, that's their life, that's their stuff, I don't care, right? They come in here, and then there's a bunch of different ways that people piss on the practice, right? So one of them is, the thing that unskillfully I called pearls before swine before. One of them is the thing where I'm putting out something that I hold of huge, huge value, and it's not connecting to them, and they don't care about it. And so they treat it casually and carelessly. That's actually my fault. I haven't aimed the material correctly to the student. I haven't gotten the right stuff for that person in that time. And so the fact that they don't treat something that I hold as having huge value with the appropriate respect, and they're good people and they're just, they're just not getting it, that's not their fault, that's my fault. I didn't give them the right thing. So I have to understand what's the bit that will connect with them. At the far extreme, there's somebody who's, an active danger to the other students in the school, throw them out. No second chances, none whatsoever. Talk to them, say, no, really, that's not cool. You can't do that. And if they do it again, they're gone. That's just it. No second chances. Then there's the big middle ground of people who, for whatever reason, are rubbing me the wrong way. Or I see them rubbing other students the wrong way. Or I see them behaving inappropriately in class. And so that's as much a challenge for me as anything. How do I give them some feedback, nudge them in the right direction? How do I manage it so it doesn't get out of hand, so they don't become a danger to other students? If they're hurting themselves, either, by not partaking of this thing that's available to them, well, that's really theirs. If they hurt other people, that's a problem. And the hurt of other people can happen different ways. It can happen from somebody lording it over somebody else and building themselves up, especially in push hands, even though they don't necessarily have any more skill. They've just got confidence and bravado and size, and they do something that makes the other people feel like shit. Mm-hmm. And so I watch that a lot, especially with the women, because nothing makes the women leave faster than, geez, now I'm getting pushed around by a bunch of guys. That's my whole fucking life, is guys pushing me around. I don't need that happening here. So I really try to watch that energetically. And steer away from it. Inappropriate behavior in the class, I try to, keep them on topic. And then some amount of it is just like, well, you don't like everybody. And so there can be people in class who don't really like each other. And I'm like, sorry, you got to work with each other. And that's just part of it. We have the timer. Ding, 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 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You don't spend too long with somebody you think's an asshole. And you know what? Some of the people you think are assholes turn out to actually be really great. And, they're working through their stuff too. And then they break through it and suddenly everything is different. And, people that I would have written off 10, 15, 20 years ago turn out to be awesome. I have other students coming up to me and saying, oh, it was so great to push with this guy. And I'm thinking, wow, I kind of wrote that guy off decades ago. And I just, deal with him as part of what's here, and now it's super positive, and I see him making progress and being happy and enjoying it and growing, and it reminds me not to write people off too fast. But if they're causing harm to other students, if there's any danger of anybody getting hurt, they have to leave, and that's just it. That's my job. I have to make a safe space and protect the students, and they have to leave, and they can't come back. There's a couple people who've gotten thrown out permanently. One of them has tried to come back a couple times, and I'm like, no, you crossed the line, and you crossed it seriously, and I can't trust you, and I can't ever let you in here again. And that's just the way it is. I'm sorry. I would like to give you forgiveness and have that work out well, and I'm not going to, and that's a lesson for both of us. Did I hit that boundary wrong and manage the situation so that it flew out of control, how much of that was mine. And he went way over the edge. So I can't trust that he will not cross that edge again. And so hopefully he's learning from that also. But people outside, reputation of Tai Chi, who cares? If they're uptight about it, who cares? Who cares?
Very well. How do you deal with people not taking you seriously
Oh, time, right?
within the practice? Specifically?
Yeah, that's, either they do or they don't. Sure, it pisses me off sometimes.
It's like, oh, you're, white guy, you just took over the school. How can you
Yeah.
possibly know
Yeah, how can you possibly?
what you're talking
and,
about?
I'm not that great, right? I got some stuff, I know how to do some things. I'm not that great. So if somebody comes in here and watches my skill and touches me and says, it's not that great, what can I say, right? I am too. I'm not. I'm pretty good, but I'm not that great. So if somebody correctly judges that, well, hats off to them. And if they can find somebody better, great. Most of the people who come through here could learn a lot by studying with me. So I feel like I got stuff to offer. But if they don't want it, that's okay. And if there's people, this is kind of back to the last question, people pissing on the practice. If there's people who are in here who are ignoring what we're doing, who are contributing generally to the good vibe of the school, who are paying, okay. Now, so, I'll stop giving them very much. I'll try to give them something every month or so, and then I watch if they do it. And if they don't, I pay less attention to them. And I figure, who knows what's going on? Maybe this person's going through a couple year cycle where things are changing inside and lots going on. For whatever reason, they can't hear this and they can't practice it. But they're still coming, they're still making the effort. I should provide them the space in the community and let them be part of it. And, they are paying to keep the lights on and the heat going, and, then it is partly a business. And it's not bad, they're getting exercise, not hurting anybody. Okay. I won't put a lot of effort into trying to correct them. We start sword class off and we're doing the cutting drills, which I think are super, super important, and somebody isn't doing them. Am I going to yell at that person for not doing them? I'll think, well, that's pretty weird. I think this is like a key to unlock the whole practice, and you're not willing to do it? Well, okay. And guess what? Then when I watch you doing the form, I don't see those things in your form. So I think it would help you, but okay. You're treading water for a week, a month, a year, a decade, whatever. You're not hurting anybody. Right? Other people like you. They seem to have fun practicing together with you. Great, cool.
A follow-up to that, how do you deal with challenges to your skill or experience or ability? Whether that takes the form of I don't know if Rocky Mountain Tai Chi's ever had this, but actual school challenges.
An actual school challenge. I've never had
someone
to do
just
that.
informally
Yeah.
saying, hey, I want to you up.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah,
I don't think you've got the skill. I want to test you.
Yeah, so that happens, right? People come who are new to the school, and they want to see what's here, and I got to show them, right? Somebody comes in who's practiced Tai Chi and done martial arts, and they're coming to push hands, and you got to push with them, and you got to actually do it, and you got to see, and I have to be ready for them to say, okay, so that's what you got? Cool, not interested. See ya. I got more than that. I want to be careful that nobody gets hurt. I don't want to damage the environment of the school by having me and some other guy in a whole tussle over here that's got bad vibes, right? When you and I play pretty vigorously, I think that's just great. Well, I think it's good for everybody to see us able to take it to that level, keep the vibe really good, be respectful and, serious while we're doing it. That's just good. It shouldn't be this thing of, oh my God, he hit me, right? You can't have that. But also, I don't want somebody coming in here and then it becomes a clash of egos and I've got a whole thing going. That would be bad for the school. So, that hasn't happened. So I would hope that I'd be willing to lose. That hasn't happened. People who've come in like that, I can throw them around. That's what I do, because it's only fair, right? I mean, new people come, they've practiced other places, they want to see what's going on. I try to pull them aside, and I, try to throw them around some, because that's only fair. That's, they want to see what's going on. So, sometimes students, you'll work with somebody for a long time, and you'll get students who come in and are wanting to prove something and see something that's going on, and I have a relationship with them at that point, so I want to be totally honest and open, and people can see me make mistakes, students can push me, stuff will happen, and so if we want to play the escalated game, sure, let's play the escalated game. Let's try to do it respectfully. We're trying to keep each other from not getting hurt, but students have to see what they've got. And, at some point, some student who I've been teaching will come and, kick my ass and move on, and awesome, right? Because now they've learned, they've got what I had to teach them, and hopefully I'll be able to connect with somebody. Yeah. So it's actually been pretty easy. We're not very martial, so we don't get that whole thing. Occasionally people come and want to play around, and I try to make sure they play my game rather than me getting caught in their game. As long as I have them playing my game, then I can manage it and keep it under decent, keep the vibes good. But if I need to win, I try to win, right? It's a circumstance where you need to win. I don't insist on never using force. If I get them caught and locked up and I can only push them by using force, I push them by using force. If I knew I had to win for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. How do you deal with competition, like from other schools, other Tai Chi? Because I know that there are several Tai Chi
There are
institutions in the area.
Yeah, it's just not an issue. I'm not.
Never been an issue?
No, I know that Jade and Baton had some problems with students who had studied and then went off and started their own schools. And there was some bad vibes, and, it was trouble for a while. And maybe that'll happen. But I don't have any problem with that. I don't think it's not the fact of other schools or people doing stuff that, it's not like we only have a few students because somebody else is pulling stuff off. And what we do is different than what other people do. So if somebody finds something else more interesting, they should go do that. That's not an issue I worry about at all. No.
Okay. Yeah. Very well. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you haven't dealt with too much gender discrimination.
Well, the whole gender thing is big. I don't get discriminated against. But I certainly watch...
Because I had that conversation with Beth.
Yeah, right. I certainly watch women not treated with respect. And I also watch women position themselves so that they won't be taken seriously. And so it's a really hard line to watch. Like some women that I've worked with are just like, I am more macho than any of the guys. And, that's one stance you can take, but most women can't do that. That's a rare woman who can do that. And most guys just assume, our bones developed in the presence of testosterone. Our muscles are stronger. Weight for weight. We just have, even me, who's like a, wimpy, not very strong guy, my muscles are stronger than most women's muscles, just because of the hormones that I grew up with. So I have an innate advantage. And, guys all do have that. And so there's a male-female dynamic that is, and then there's the same thing of, can you hit a girl? And, a lot of guys can't handle that, right? And so there's, I could have won if I'd been able to really use all my stuff. So the fact that she beat me doesn't really count because I held back, right? And that's just total bullshit, Yeah, it's total bullshit because you're not being respectful to the woman. So it goes all the ways, then there's the girls who are like, he hit me, right? It's like, you were doing a martial art. Yeah. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it, you must respect me and you can't hit me. You can't have that. And as the guys, you can't have, I can't have a girl beat me, but I sure can't do anything to her. Because I am out of control, vicious animal, and to hurt her is to kill her.
So there has to be a sort of sense of equality and at the same time, respect.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Like, it's the same kind of respect that you would have for someone with the same gender in terms of, like, let's not kill each other. Mm-hmm. Let's not really hurt each other, but, Like, I'm not going to hold back just because you're a different gender.
Right. Yeah. Or
Except in the case of, like, I'm not going to go push you in your high risk, high voltage areas.
Yeah. But even that, right? You know, the boobs. You got to be careful with them.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
You know, the women that I play vigorously with, you know, sometimes a boob will end up in my hand, and if I'm not, you know, if I'm not doing anything inappropriate, it's just what happened, right? And so then it's okay. You apologize. You know, step back and start again. But it's not fair to be like, ooh, no touchy, no touchy, no touchy. And if I'm grabbing them, that's obnoxious. That's not cool. That would be violating the school ethics. That's throw them out. But, you know, we got these parts and they're there, and I can't like not do anything, but I'm not going to go after her tits. But, you know, if something happens and there's contact, well, bummer. Sorry. Tried not to do that. But it shouldn't matter. It's just, you know, you just keep going. Conversely, I've pushed with some competition women who apparently, I don't know, but apparently if you dig your fingers into this part of the chest and you're a girl, it really hurts. No.
Yes.
And so I've pushed with competition women who will take their thumbs and poke them into my chest here. And I'm like, you know, I'm a guy and that's just bones. I mean, it just doesn't do anything. And they're expecting that if they do that, then I'm going to go, ah! And, you know, start and then they can push me. And so that's a weird flip side of the bullshit. You're like, what the hell is this? Right, if, you know, if one of them need me in the balls, that wouldn't be cool. And that would be malicious. You know, if we're playing vigorously and I end up with my leg straddling her leg and it hurts a little bit, well, that's my version of my hand slipped.
Right.
It's like, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Knee me in the balls, not cool. Poke me in the chest, I think that's really weird. Come with a super low cut, revealing top, everything here, and be ready to push hands with the boys, and then get uptight because you're getting weird sexual vibes from the guys. That's also not cool, right? So there's, you know, all this stuff happens.
Common sense.
Yeah, common sense.
Common sense. Okay.
You're gonna put all this on the internet?
Yes. You can talk about that afterwards.
I don't think I've said anything I wouldn't mind saying.
What are your thoughts on bringing other practices and traditions into Tai Chi?
I think
the fusion or the incorporation or the informing in both directions.
So I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think it's just a good thing. So I think you have to do it carefully. It is going to happen. And I think, like, you guys, this next generation, are really, you know, you're absolutely going to do that. Especially Naropa students getting a degree in this thing. Well, you're getting a degree in it. You're going to use it in your next career steps, whatever they are. And you should. Right? You know, Professor Yang Cheng Fu, Professor Cheng, Chain and Baton, big popularizers. More Tai Chi is better. So, drawing walls around it and closing things off and saying no now is completely not appropriate. The danger is that you lose the Tai Chi, right? And then it becomes standing, not very deep yoga. You know, I mean, I'm not trying to say that yoga isn't deep, because clearly it really is.
I know what you mean. The current form of yoga, that it's core power yoga and all this.
Hot butt yoga and all that stuff.
Buns of steel, abs of platinum.
Yeah, to do that with Tai Chi, I think, would be a pity. On the other hand, if someone made a career as a fitness instructor and used stuff that came out of Chinese martial arts and Tai Chi and helped other people, you know, become in tune with their bodies and become fit, and that, I can't say that's a bad thing. No. So it's going to get blended. It's, you know, I just described a little bit ago, feeling like my job is to take all these pieces that I got from the different people and try to put them back together into a single whole. You could flip that around and say, well, geez, here you are blending these bits of, you know, standing practice in Jibun Gong that you got out of the Bon Ho tradition, Jian Ho tradition, with stuff from Wang Sheng Shen, with stuff from Chengmen Cheng in New York. You know, what you're doing is a mongrel mixed thing. Sure, they're all Tai Chi, but it's just as mixed as anything else. Of course, I feel like I'm putting together the pieces that fit and, you know, preserving the integrity. So for some, you know, and I pay a lot of attention to Western anatomy, pay a lot of attention to sort of internal dance. So there's, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff coming out of the dance world that's very visualization, awareness oriented, real focused on being able to use all the parts of the body. And I pay a lot of attention to that stuff, and it influences what I'm doing. I'm not gonna, try to teach dancers how to be better dancers, but some of the stuff those people have talked about and thought about it is really influential. So it's blended in here. So the art's going to keep going, right? It's not the pro wrestling. It's not the throwdown in the streets of Beijing and Shanghai. It's not the Beijing Physical Cultural Center and the Shanghai Physical Education Center and the weak man of the East being defended against the West. It's not all those things. It's not Professor Chung coming to New York and being an effete gentleman painter who's also working to clean up the mafia triad action in Chinatown. It's not my teachers coming and just spreading it far and wide and helping create this, institution of Buddhist-inspired contemplative education, transform yourself, transform the world, which is actually real. That everybody's done different stuff with it. And so I think, you all are going to do different stuff with it too. Stick with the principles. You know what the good practice is. Don't use force. Use E and Chi. Move
Sounds like you're quoting
authentically. Move with integrity. And I think if you do that stuff, it's all good. If you're, cheapening it, cutting pieces out, you don't have integrity, so it doesn't matter what you did that with. If you're using it to inform something else that has integrity, awesome, great, right? So that's the thing. So yeah, it'll keep changing. Creating a weird blend of Tai Chi and Muay Thai, that would just be weird. No. Yeah.
You talk about that afterwards.
Advancing your Muay Thai skills by, bringing softness, listening, and, balance, all those things. That makes a lot of sense to me. Becoming a better martial artist because you're doing all those things. Yeah, sure. Finding a way that yoga isn't all about the extremes of movement, but is about becoming more comfortable in a larger expanded space and bringing Tai Chi notions to that. Cool. Doing some weird thing with third eyes and a single whip. I don't know about that, right? I'm just making shit up. But
I don't even know how that would work.
yeah, those would seem strange to me. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. No, but authenticity, integrity. Use E, not Li. Do all that. Yeah, cool.
So, what do you see as important in the field? And then what do you want to see from the students going forward who are the next generation? What do you want to see happen?
I feel like it's gotten broad, and I want to get more depth. I feel like that's my task, is to try to bring more depth to people. So the practice is deep, high, martial art, no limits, and that's the energy, the direction I want to put my energy into, providing more depth, more height, more achievement in Tai Chi, because I believe from that, for one thing, it helps do my best to preserve the art and the school and everything. And I think it also gives people a better basis for doing the new things with than a superficial understanding of it. So we do the form, that's the whole deal. And then we make other stuff up. You'll do a lot better if you've got a deeper grounding in actual Tai Chi, and then you take it and do your own thing. So I think that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see, there's huge breadth, I'd like to see more depth, and I'd like to see people creating and extending from a more solid foundation. That's where I want to put my energy, is into trying to get solid foundations, more depth, not particularly broadening. I figure everybody else will broaden it. Yeah, then that'll just happen, right? That's not where I need to put my energy. So, and I'd like the students that come out of here to have that. It took me too long, right? 30 years. Couldn't have been done in 5. Should have been done in less than 30. And I'd like to, it wasn't trying to do, it was my life and it's how I got here and it's what happened. So, should. But it ought to be possible for me to set and, put an environment in place and put, circumstances in place that let devoted and talented students achieve what I've achieved more quickly. Yeah. And I think I can help them find a path to do that. And then more depth for them to have to do their new things with. So open it up from a better foundation.
Okay. Last question.
This is the kicker.
If you would, if you could condense the totality of your practice and what you view the breadth and scope and depth of Tai Chi as into a single word or phrase, what would it be?
Present and completely engaged.